I don't know if any of y'all spent any time in a Taco Bell in the 90s, but these like really like highly saturated neon colors were omnipresent. Hello and welcome back to Andalusia Knits. I'm Jordan and I have a bit of a different kind of video for you today. Normally I sit here and I talk about the projects I'm currently working on and the things I'm currently knitting on, but today I wanted to do something a little bit different and try an experiment that I've had my eyes on for a bit. And so the idea for this experiment started last year when I finally caught the self-striping sock yarn bug. I knit a lot of socks, but I had never done any sort of like self-striping, like intentional measured out color changing sort of yarns before, and gave those a try and immediately fell in love with them. It's so fun, so cool to like get all these nice color designs without having to do any extra work. And so once I started getting into those, I started noticing a yarn that I believe was released for the first time last year in 2025, or at the very least, it got very popular in 2025, which is technically a self-striping yarn, but it is probably a self-striping yarn that not a lot of knitters have used before, and that is the new Red Heart Granny Square yarn. And so basically this is yarn made for crocheters to knit the traditional granny square design in multiple colors, but without having to like actually change any yarns as you're doing it or weave in any ends. So like the color stripes or the color changes in this kind of yarn are like very like measured out to a specific like gauge and stitch count for crochet, and obviously in knitting all of that is going to go out the window. But I'm very excited to see if I can like get anything cool or at least anything like nice looking out of this yarn as a knitter, as someone who is not, I don't know how to crochet, and I would like to learn how to crochet, but I've watched several videos of people using this yarn to crochet granny squares, and apparently it's pretty challenging. I don't think this should be my first foray into crochet, so I'm gonna stick with knitting today. And I got a couple different colors of this yarn, and I have to say, like, I am loving these color schemes so much. So this first one, this like black with a bunch of like neon color accents, it is the colorway, let's see if I can find that. No, of course I can't. Where is the, one moment, I've read this label before. It's on here somewhere, I know it. Okay, this yarn is called, this colorway is called Rad Party, and this colorway is called Amethyst. And I got both of these off of Amazon, and I picked them specifically because they are giving off like major 90s vibes in completely different ways. So this one, I immediately thought of that like abstract like paper cup design from the 90s with like all the purples and the aquas in it. And I'm sure there's a name for it. I'll put a picture of it up on screen so you know what I'm talking about. But if you lived through the 90s, you absolutely saw those paper cups at some point with a really cool abstract design. And so that's why I picked this one. And then I chose this one because it just screamed like mid-90s Taco Bell to me. I don't know if any of y'all spent any time in a Taco Bell in the 90s, but these like really like highly saturated neon colors were omnipresent in them. So I picked out a couple of colorways that I really am excited to give a try. And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to knit a couple plain swatches with these. I'm going to do a flat swatch and an in the round swatch. And I just want to see, like, without doing anything else, without having to like think or try to plan anything else, like what are these going to look like just knit up like normal. And I have a sneaking suspicion it's not going to be great, but that's okay because I have some more ideas in mind to try later in the video. For different ways to combine, to make interesting color ideas with these yarns. But for now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get to just knitting a couple basic swatches, one flat and one in the round, just to see the starting point of what I'm working with. and I will get back to you with those when I'm done with them. Okay, so I've already noticed a couple interesting things about this yarn. And the first one is that despite the fact that this is yarn that is very much made for crocheters, it does give you a suggested knitting gauge on which is a US 8 for a 4x4 square. That's 17 stitches and 23 rows. And so I've gone with a size 7 because I tend to knit a little looser than normal. And I've also noticed that I think if I want the colors to change like in the same way that they would change in the granny square, I would have to pull from the center pull, and I am not going to do that ever. I will not do that for anyone. So the color changes are just going to have to be in the opposite order for me. But other than that, I'm ready to get started. We are playing a dangerous game because my cat has like a self-destructive love of the tips of these DPNs. He loves like rubbing the corners of his mouth on them, and he will just like slam his face into them without any regard for like where his eyes are in relation to the points of these needles. And so I'm always very wary when he is in my lap and I'm trying to do DPN, so please don't be mad at me when I eject him from his seat right now, because it's for his own good. I don't want to accidentally poke him in the eye in his excitement from rubbing on these DPNs. All right, it is the next day, and I have my 2 initial swatches knit from the Granny Square yarn, and it's kind of a good news, bad news situation. And the good news is that it is just as awful as I predicted. So my prediction skills get an A+. The bad news is obviously that it does not look great. And so I'll just go ahead and show you what I've got so far. And so this first one is a swatch knit flat. And I mean, like, in terms of like the color scheme and everything, I love these colors. I love how just like stupidly saturated and stupidly neon they are. But you can see when I get close up, like the color changes, because of the nature of granny squares, like the color changes are very abrupt, as opposed to like self-striping sock yarn where there's kind of like a transition between the 2 colors to sort of ease that and make it look nice no matter where it happens to fall in the round. But with the Granny Square yarn, there's none of that. It just changes colors immediately, and that really makes the stripes look ugly. And for the swatch in the round, it's basically the same deal. Like you can see the places where the colors have changed very abruptly, but at least within the round, you can sometimes at least hide those changes on the other side, so you can't see them. It looks nice and neat on this side, but once again, yeah, like it's just not really a very nice yarn to use if you're just going to be doing plain stockinette, or even like I would imagine like garter stitch or ribbing. Even you're still going to get those really abrupt color changes when the color changes in the yarn. So that did not turn out as nice as I hoped, but it did turn out as bad as I anticipated, so it's fine. And really, I just wanted to do that just to show that like this is not great for just plain knitting, but I have found something that I think it is going to be great for, and that is marled knitting. And so my next step in this video is I am going to knit a couple of hats using this yarn held double. And so the first hat I'm going to work on, the first string, I'm going to pull from both ends of the balls. I know I complained about center pull balls earlier in the video, but I'm actually going to have to do it for this. So the first hat I'm going to do, I'm going to marl them where the color changes are like, they're starting on opposite ends. So like one strand is going to start at the beginning of the color changes, and the other strand is going to start at the end, and they'll eventually like meet and pass one another as I'm knitting. And so hopefully that's going to give me a cool effect. And then the other thing I want to try is the same thing, two-stranded marled knitting, but instead of having the color changes going in the opposite direction, I'm going to have both of the color changes in the same direction, but I'm going to start the strands at different points in the yarn. So it's not just like doubling up on the same colors always. There'll still be some actual marling going on. And I've actually, like, spoiler alert, I've actually started one of those hats already. I've already begun the hat that uses the color changes that are starting at the opposite ends, and it looks really cool. It looks really different. I was not expecting this result. So I'm very excited to finish that up and start the other one with the other marling technique. And the pattern I'm using is Passionate Kelsey's ribbed beanie tutorial. It's here on YouTube. I'll link it below. There's also a written version I believe she has for sale on Ravelry, but it's just a very basic pattern. It's a well-written pattern, but I just wanted something that would really like be simple and basic and let the marling shine, and I think that I have found it. And so I'm going to continue knitting on the first hat, and I will get back to you when I've made some progress. All right, well, I finished this thing up. And I'm gonna go ahead. I love the way this looks. It's such fantastic colors. It's a little dark outside. It doesn't quite maybe look the exact same as it did in the other segments. But yeah, I will talk more in depth about this once I finish the second one. But just my initial thoughts were that this is like a comically stiff fabric. Let me try. I'm scared to try to put this on my head now, but let's see if we can get it to work. It folds up. It's a little, all right, well, it's a hat. It's a little small. I think I haven't measured it. I'll need to measure it and stuff after I'm done with everything else. I don't know. I wanted the authentic Passionate Kelsey experience, and so I did not knit a gauge swatch when I started this. I just cast on and went. And so I don't know if it is like maybe my gauge is smaller than it needs to be, but also I know about myself that I prefer a hat that is maybe doesn't have as much negative ease as is traditionally written in modern hat patterns, so that could be the issue as well. Honestly, like, I can't really get it in frame. Like, it looks a little goofy up top, but like this, I could make this work, I think. I don't know. For the second one, I'm definitely gonna add like 4 or 8 extra stitches. Yeah, okay, anyways, I'll stop talking about this now and go more in depth about how this turned out once I finish knitting the second hat. Okay, it is a couple days later now, and I have finished the second hat I was going to knit, and it fits quite a bit better than the original one. And at this point, I thought I was going to be ready to like discuss the results and what I've learned from using this yarn, but there's actually a third project that I thought of that I want to try out before I sort of do my final verdict and analysis of knitting with this Granny Square yarn. And so the last thing that I want to knit for this experiment, I'm going with a cowl this time, mostly just because like I could do it as another hat, but I'm very tired of knitting hats at this point. And so I have started a stranded color work cowl. It's not, I haven't gotten very far, just sort of did like the bottom edging to it so far. And basically what I'm doing is doing 2 colored traveling twisted stitches. And while this is not really the place to explain what a traveling twisted stitch is, if you're not familiar, so basically traveling twisted stitches I've only done a couple rows and they're very sloppy at this point, but it kind of gives you these like diagonal leaning lines of stitches in sort of a similar way to like a line of decreases will create sort of that like diagonal line where in the direction that all the decreases are leaning. You can do that without having to decrease any stitches by doing these traveling twisted stitches. And so I'm trying this two color effect, which if you've watched any of my videos in the past, you have probably seen me experiment with this two color traveling twisted stitch a little bit. But yeah, so I wanted to see how that was going to do. And so while I've experimented with this technique in the past before with other color changing yarns, and you can find some episodes of my podcast where I've done some swatches and talked about this technique, I wanted to do it with this granny square yarn particularly because most of the time when I'm dealing with color changing yarns, they are either changing colors faster than they do in the granny square yarn, or they're changing, it's like a slow gradient and the colors are changing way slower than they do in this gradient. But this is sort of like, the color changes are longer than most variegateds I've encountered, but they're shorter than like an ombre effect or whatever. And so I wanted, in this sort of middle ground, I wanted to see like what this technique would look like. And I think it'll be fine. This is probably not going to be the most exciting thing I knit up with, but like as I was knitting that second hat, I just like got it in my mind that I needed a third project to test this out on. Two was just not enough for me. And so I settled on this one because I think it'll look, I'm not entirely sure what it's going to look like, but I know enough to like be confident that it's not going to turn out absolutely terribly. So I'm going to keep knitting on this, and once I am done knitting this cowl, I will for real finally go through all three things that I've knit with the granny square yarn and really break down like what I like and what I don't like about knitting with this yarn that is meant to be crocheted with. So anyways, I'm gonna get to knitting and I'll talk to y'all in just a little bit. Alright, so I have finished knitting everything at this point, and it is time to take a look at what I have gotten done. And so I'm going to go through the individual projects that I knit first, and then I will talk a little bit in general about my experiences with the granny square yarn and how I liked it, whether I would try this again, would I recommend this to other people, those sorts of reviewy type things. So I'm going to start with the last thing that I knit, and that was this cowl. And please forgive me, I did this in kind of a rush. I wanted this to get done as quickly as possible, so I knit it at a pretty loose gauge. Maybe a little bit looser of a gauge than you would want when you're doing two color traveling twisted stitches. They're not quite as nice and even as neat as I would want them, and if I knit them at a tighter gauge, they probably would have neatened up a little bit, but that's fine. This was all about like learning something. This is not meant to be, I'm probably never going to wear this. This was meant to figure something out, and I have to say that I like the results that I got with this. And so you can kind of see, oh, actually I got this upside down. I don't guess it matters either way, but you can kind of see how for each of these like diagonal lines, you get a few rounds of each color before it switches to another one. And now obviously, because this is granny square yarn, not every color is getting the same number of rounds because each color is a little bit shorter or longer than the one that came before or after it. But I like this because with more just like general, generic, traditional, variegated style yarns, color changing yarns, the color changes are typically happening a lot faster. And so like the idea that you could even get one round in all of the same color is pretty rare with a variegated yarn, but with a yarn with slower color changes like this, you can get a few rounds before you get to a color change, and so it kind of creates a striping effect that I don't entirely hate. Like this, this turned out fine. This turned out about as I expected. It's not the greatest. It's not, I don't think, my biggest success with this granny square yarn, but it was nice to see that, like, I had an idea that it was gonna, you know, have these color changes every few rounds, and then knit it up and see that that actually happened. I'm pleased with the results. Not the greatest thing ever, but I'm glad I tried this one out. I'm glad I had the thought to do a third project, and I'm glad I made it this one. So there is the cowl that I did, and now I'll move on to the hats, which I would consider much bigger successes. And so I'll do this one first. This is actually the second hat I knit. And this one, I did some adjusting to the pattern to make it fit me a little bit better than the first one did. And so, while it does fit me, it doesn't look terrible. It's just, it's a very thick, it's a very big hat. Like, I just don't know. I am already kind of a bulky guy. I don't know if I need more bulk, especially in the head area. I have a kind of a large head. I don't need any help making it bigger than normal. But that being said, in terms of the color changes, I love this. This was some of the best marling I think I've ever done in my life. And so just as a reminder for this colorway, what I did was I had 2 balls of yarn that were moving through the granny square color changes as intended, but I started one of those balls of yarn at the beginning of the color changes, and I started the second ball of yarn about halfway through. So there are, you do see some like striping, especially in the white, because the white is the color that's most represented in this colorway. And so you get a little bit of striping, but really the colors don't have a lot of opportunity to be matched up with their own the same color in the second strand. And so it's kind of like more diffuse striping. And like I said, this is some of my favorite marling I think I've ever done. It looks so great. I am not mad at this at all in terms of the stripes, but I am a little mad in terms of the bulk and the size of the hat. But this one turned out great. This was a great experiment. And that being said, I have to say that this hat, the first hat that I knit, is probably the best thing that I did to come out of this experiment. And I just really love these distinctive like fuchsia pink stripes. It's so cool, so bright and beautiful. And so for this one, unlike the other one, for this hat, I marled it by holding one strand of yarn moving through the granny square color changes in the intended direction, and the other ball of yarn I was moving through the color changes in the opposite direction. And I guess that means we can infer from this that like the fuchsia pink, that color, that pink color, is like sort of the midpoint of the color changes in terms of like yardage, because that is where the 2 strands were like consistently meeting up. Whereas everywhere else, like I would get like a few stitches like in this fuchsia or in this teal color where the marling is doing 2 strands of the same color at once. But for the most part, outside of the pink color, everything is always getting marled with some other color besides itself. And yeah, this one turned out great. I didn't like I said, I think I've mentioned this earlier in the video, and my apologies if I'm like repeating stuff like crazy, because I filmed this over the span of like a couple weeks at this point. And so, you know, what you've heard 5 minutes ago in the video, I said like 2 weeks ago. So I'm having a real hard time remembering everything I've already said about this. And like I said, I knit this first one up. I didn't do any sort of gauge swatch or anything. And so it ended up being a little too small. I intended for it to be like a folded brim. It's absolutely too small for that. Like I can't even get it over my ears entirely. And as a non-folded brim, it looks kind of strange on me. I don't know. I feel like I live in Whoville or something. It's a very interesting sort of like peanut shape that I have gone back and forth between hating and loving. But the one thing that I don't have ambiguous feelings on, is this color scheme. I absolutely love the effect that I got with this one, from running one strand of yarn in the correct direction and one strand of yarn in the opposite direction. And so now that I have shown you the 3 projects, I want to talk a little bit in general about this yarn and whether I liked it, or the things that I liked about it and the things that I didn't like about it, because there were absolutely some things that I thought were really cool about this yarn and some things that would give me pause to use it again. And so obviously the thing that I liked the most was these really cool marling color effects that I got in the hats. It's so cool. It's absolutely really just like, I mean, it's very wild and crazy, but because all of the colors are like intended to go together, it never feels like too wild and crazy to me. So I really like the marling effect that I got. And I think it would be interesting to try this effect out in other colorways. I picked the two that I liked the most, but there were several when I was looking at different colorways to buy for this that I was going back and forth between. And so, yeah, I really like the effect I got, but the biggest like drawback to this yarn to me is that first and foremost, it's Red Heart yarn. And like in terms of acrylic yarns, they are not winning any awards for like how soft the yarn is, because it's not soft. It's kind of stiff and scratchy, more so than other acrylic yarns, which is my first stumbling block. And the other thing that I'm not crazy about is that while I did get these really cool effects, it requires me to hold this worsted weight yarn double, which is giving me like approximately like a super bulky gauge. So the only way that I can enjoy this effect is if I'm knitting things at a super bulky gauge in acrylic yarn that is already kind of scratchy and stiff. And so that really limits the number of things that I would want to knit with this. Because like even something like a hat, like I said, it's not terrible, but the super bulkiness of the hat is giving me pause. It's just way more bulk on my head than I want. And especially it being acrylic yarn, unless it is just like deathly cold outside, this is gonna get way too hot on my head very quickly. And so that's the biggest stumbling block for me, is that this yarn is only available as a worsted weight acrylic. And in doing some research, I saw that in the past that the yarn brand Katya, they offered a granny square yarn as well that they called Insta Granny, which was a fantastic name. And I believe it was in superwash wool. I think it was still worsted weight wool, but at least it was wool and not acrylic. But so that would have been preferable, but that yarn is discontinued. And correct me if I'm wrong, I didn't do a ton of research on this, but to my knowledge now, this Red Heart all-in-one granny square yarn is the only one available at this point. So that really, yeah, the fiber makeup and the weight of the yarn, the limitations on those really give me pause and really make me reconsider wanting to knit more of these, because like I'm not a total acrylic hater, and I'm not like a total chunky knits hater. There's like a time and a place for those sorts of projects, but at least for my personal preferences and what I want to knit, like there are very few times and places when those types of yarns are going to work for me and give me something that I like and want to use. And so lastly, would I buy this yarn again? Would I recommend this yarn again? Would I continue to use this yarn again? And I'm going to go through those questions individually because I have different answers for all of them. Would I use this yarn again? Yes, I would, because I have a ton left over from what I bought to do these experiments. I have enough for probably at least like 4 to 6 more hats in these two colors. And so, you know, for the sake of like getting this, I have way too much yarn in my house all the time to begin with. And so for the sake of like getting this yarn out of my house, I absolutely would continue to knit these hats, because I think that I could probably pretty easily give them away to people, might even be able to sell them. And they knit up super quick. Like these took, especially the small one, it took me just a few hours to do this. And so, yeah, I would absolutely continue using the granny square yarn that I currently have, just for the sake of, like, it did some cool things and I don't want it in the house anymore. But would I go out and buy more of this yarn? I would say probably not. And for all the reasons that I have already discussed And mainly just being that like there are just not a lot of projects that I want to knit that require acrylic yarn at a super bulky gauge. And that's not saying that's a bad yarn, it's just saying that like there's a disconnect between the yarn and the kind of projects that I want to knit. So I don't know that I would ever actively seek this yarn out again, but I absolutely will try to knit through the yarn that I currently have already. And in terms of like suggesting the yarn, like, I mean, if you're no stranger to Red Heart, if you know what you're getting when you buy Red Heart, and you are really into affordable, chunky knits, then this might very well be something that you absolutely love and you might absolutely be interested in. But like, if you don't have a passion for chunky knits and you don't have a passion for acrylic yarn, I might say that this is one that you would want to avoid. But that being said, like I said, so it was a little, you know, kind of a mixed bag with this stuff. It wasn't all bad, but it was definitely not all good. It's just a matter of like, this is a yarn not intended to be knit up. And so you kind of have to get creative with how you're going to make it work in knitting. And while I was able to make it work in knitting, I don't know that I would want to make much more of this work in knitting. I think I'm probably content to leave this to the crocheters because there is no shortage of self-striping yarn, variegated, color-changing yarn out there that is available in weights and fiber makeups that I use a lot more and that I gravitate towards more. So very happy, very proud of these knits. I know I keep showing off the hats and not the poor cowl. It was kind of an afterthought and it looks like it. But, oh, and by the way, I don't think I ever mentioned this. The contrast yarn is obviously the Granny Square Red Heart yarn. And then this background color, it was just some loops and threads gray acrylic that I had that didn't have any use for. And I needed the background color, so I used it for that. But yeah, the hats turned out great, but it's one of those things that's like, it's a very specific niche use case for this yarn. And I don't know if I'll be back in these parts much soon again, because I just don't have a lot of use for super duper bulky acrylic knits. But anyways, so that was my Red Heart all-in-one Granny Square yarn experiments. I think I did pretty good for knitting them up instead of crocheting them. And I will say, I'm not going to show this on camera, but I did film some footage of me trying to actually do a crochet a granny square with these. And it went about as bad as you would expect for someone who only has like a passing cursory knowledge of how to do crochet. I'm definitely going to have to try my hand at some more basic techniques before I do some actual granny squares. But I hope you got something out of this. I hope you enjoyed watching this. Thanks for making it all the way through. If you like videos like these, then I would really encourage you to go ahead and give me a thumbs up on this video so that I know that. And if you want to see more videos like these, then you can also subscribe. I try to put out a video every week to every 2 weeks at this point. And I've got some more experiments in the future. I also do some more like podcast style episodes where I talk you through what I'm currently knitting on and that sort of stuff. So if that sounds interesting, I'd be tickled if you'd give me a subscribe. But otherwise, once again, thanks for watching, and I will see y'all in the next video. Bye!